Hello Booktube, hello friends, welcome to LizziefayeLovesBooks. I'm Elizabeth, and in this video I'd like to do my May reading wrap-up. So I was trying for a book a day in May. I even created that hashtag book a day in May several years ago. My friend Elizabeth Tyree and I have been doing that for several years, and I can't remember if I succeeded last year or not, but this year I didn't quite make it. I finished 29 books. I had two others that I was currently reading, and I was about 40% in to both of those, but around midnight I was just falling asleep. I could not even sit up long enough to flip through the rest of either of them in order to say they were done, and I just had to give up and go to bed. So it's all right. I did finish two books. Yesterday was June 1st, today's June 2nd, and I did finish two short books yesterday. And interestingly enough, I am really on track to read a book a day for the whole year, at least up to this point. I posted on Instagram yesterday that I hit the 150 mark, and that was my Goodreads goal. It has been for several years to read 150 books, even though really deep down my actual goal is to read more than that. 150 is just a good place to achieve, and I'm happy with that. So even if I didn't read another book for the rest of the year, I'm good with 150. Now, you guys know I'm not going to stop reading for the rest of the year. But anyway, I'm happy that I met that goal, and so let's just keep going and see if we can double it. I had said that the majority of the books that I would read in May were going to be middle grade books, and for all intents and purposes they were, but I still ended up with a few more adult books and even a few children's books that I wouldn't consider middle grade on my list by the time I got finished. So anyway, let's just move on to what I read in May. I finished 29 books, and 23 of the 29 were audio, and of the 29 books, 7 of them were adult books, and all of those were fiction, and 16 of them were what I would consider middle grade books, and then 6 of them were below middle grade and were either children's picture books or children's chapter books, but really on a lower level than what I would consider middle grade. So we'll just break these into categories, and just to break down the genres of the 7 adult books, 4 of those were romance, because I did participate in the Light and Dark readathon, and that was a romance readathon. And then one of the others was, well, of the 4 romance books, 2 of those were very dark, because you got extra points for, if you were going for light but you read dark, you got extra points. Not doing that again. If you guys saw that Friday reads, yeah, I was really uncomfortable listening to those really dark books, so we're not doing that again. But 2 of the 4 were dark. One was a classic and one was inspirational. And then of the other 3 adult books, one of them was historical fiction, or really based on a true story, and it was historical, and then the other 2 were cozy mysteries. So of all of those adult books, I would say my favorite was one of the cozy mysteries, and I will share with you about those in a little bit. So then of the middle grade books, there was quite a wide variety of genres. There were 3 that I would consider post-apocalyptic, 3 that I would consider historical, and 3 contemporary. 5 were fantasy. One of the fantasy is really not fantasy, but I don't know where else to put it, so I think we'll just put it there because it's pretty unrealistic. And 1 middle grade mystery, and then 1 middle grade nonfiction. And of the 6 children's books, 3 of those I would consider classic. At least one of those was about classic characters, even though it's not a very old book. And 1 was a children's mystery, and then the other 2 I put down as fantasy, although only really one of them is fantasy. The other one is just not very realistic. It's kind of realistic, but not very. So I don't really know where to put that. It's just silly. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's start with the middle grade books, because that's the majority of what I read. If you're not interested in hearing about the middle grade books, I will put some timestamps in my description so you can skip on past those. We'll probably do middle grade and then children and then the adult books, because most of the adult books I read earlier in the month, and I have talked about all of these except for the very last few I've talked about in my Friday Reads videos. Actually, probably just about talked about everything in Friday Reads, so we can probably just kind of make this just kind of a summary of everything. So of the middle grade books, let's start with the fantasy, because there were 5 of those. Oh, and then also I had several that I had started but didn't finish, and I'll mention those at the end as well. Most of those, the main 2 that I was 40% done with were also fantasy, so I'll just include those while I'm wrapping up the fantasy. So probably my favorite fantasy was Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. This was really cute, and most of you have probably seen the movie. The book's a little bit different. I feel like the book is written about a younger girl than the movie is about. The movie's more of a YA, and the book is definitely more middle grade, although she does grow throughout the story. So it basically is a lot like the movie, just some internal changes that make it a little bit different. But if you've seen the movie, you kind of get the gist and the premise, and I thought this book was super cute. If you haven't read the book or seen the movie, it's about a girl who was gifted, she calls it a curse, at birth by a fairy who gifted her with the gift of obedience. So no matter what anyone tells her to do, she has to obey, even if it's something she really, really, really doesn't want to do or even shouldn't do. So that's the premise of Ella Enchanted. I also listened to the second book in the Warrior series by Aaron Hunter. I did not enjoy this one quite as much as the first one. I am going to continue and at least read all of this first 6 in the series, because they're now on Hoopla on audio. I think what gave me some difficulty is the names of the characters. They all start to sound very similar, and they're all cats. There are basically no humans in the book. There are a few that the cats see, and they refer to them as 2 legs, but they're not characters in the stories. And I think I need to maybe read one of the companion books, or at least have that near me when I'm listening to the next one of these, just to kind of remind me which cats are which. And there are 3 or 4 clans of cats, and they all have very similar sounding names, so it makes it difficult to keep track of them all, and there are a lot of them. But this one had kind of a West Side Story feel to it. There were 2 cats from different clans who started a relationship, and of course the clans were at war with each other, and so that made things kind of difficult when it came to battle time. So that was one of the storylines in this one. But a very interesting series, and definitely a well-loved series by middle schoolers. In fact, Katie has read just about all of these, and she's grown past them now, but back when she was reading these, she really did love this series. Right at the end of the month, I listened to 2 books by Robin McKinley. They are the main 2 novels in the Damar series. It's basically a duology, and Robin McKinley has written a few short stories that are set in the same world. I'm trying to get my hands on those as we speak. Our library has at least one of them, and there are at least 3 different books that contain stories about Damar. So anyway, I did really enjoy these books. I do not have a physical copy of the first book, which is The Blue Sword. This is The Hero and the Crown. This is the Newbery winner from, I think, 1985. And probably the next Newbery video that I do is going to be books from the 80s. So I wanted to go ahead and read this one. I read The Blue Sword first because it's listed as the first book. However, this book is a prequel, so chronologically you could read this one first and would be completely fine. In fact, there are no spoilers in this book for the first book, The Blue Sword. And there are a few mentions in the Blue Sword of the main characters in this book. So it really doesn't matter which order you want to read them in. I just read them in publication order because that's what I tend to do, but honestly, it really would not have mattered which one I read first. I will have to say that I think I liked the Blue Sword better than The Hero and the Crown. It was a Newbery Honor book from a year or two previous to when this one won the Newbery. This is still a really good book, but I only rated this one 4 stars, and I rated the Blue Sword 5 stars. I thought it was really good. This one was just a little harder to understand the premise initially, and also the relationships in this book I thought were a little too mature for a middle grade book. Now maybe when Robin McKinley was writing this, she was thinking more of a YA audience. Mid-80s is really before YA got really big, and now I think because this is a Newbery winner, most libraries are cataloging this with juvenile fiction. I don't want to give spoilers, but there is a relationship in here that I think is a bit mature for a middle grade book, especially in light of the fact that it's pretty obvious that that relationship is not going to be the one that is long lasting, at least not in the form that it takes in the middle of this book. So anyway, I was just a little taken aback. I wasn't expecting that, and I had to kind of do some double takes and go back and think, okay, did I just hear what I think I heard? Yeah, I did. Okay. It wasn't graphic, but it was certainly implying what you would think it implies. And you would have to be really innocent or naive to not think that it implied that. And if you are a middle school reader, you might not be thinking that direction, and you might just skip over that part. But still, it was there, and it kind of bothered me a little bit for that to be in a middle grade book. So anyway, that being said, other than that, the book was very clean. It was an adventure story about a young girl who learns to fight dragons, and that's pretty much the premise of this one. Now, the Blue Sword is about the granddaughter or great-granddaughter of the main character in this book. So it's set into the future from this one, and the young lady in the Blue Sword has no idea of her heritage because her mother passed away either when she was born or right after she was born, and was not able to pass on the story of her origin, and no one else told her the history of her heritage. So when she is orphaned and then is moved to the country where this story takes place, she feels this pull towards this land and doesn't really understand why, and it goes from there. But I thought it was a really good story. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would probably reread The Blue Sword before I would reread The Hero and the Crown. The other book I finished that I'm going to include with fantasy, like I said, it's not really fantasy, but it's not very realistic either. It's The Ersatz Elevator by Lemony Snicket. I am currently reading through the series of Unfortunate Events, trying to read one a month, and this is book 6. So I'm excited that I got this read. In this book, the Baudelaire orphans are sent to live in a high-rise apartment building with a new guardian. In each book of the series, they are sent to live with a different guardian, and the ridiculousness of all of it is just what makes this story fun. Even though it's a very sad story, lots of bad and negative things happen, it's so outlandish that it just becomes a fun series to read. And I will continue to read one a month until the end of the year and check this series off my list. 2 fantasy books that I started and have not finished. One is Ink Death by Cornelia Funke, and I'm listening to this in my car, and it's a chunker. I was not in my car very much during the month, so I'm only about half done with it. And I will just continue to listen to this in my car, and hopefully I can finish the other half in the month of June. This is book 3 in the Ink World trilogy, and I am having a hard time really getting into this story. I really want to finish this and say I finished it, but I just keep on listening to it and hope that there's at least a single thread of storyline that will grab me and pull me in, and so far it just hasn't. I kind of basically know what's going on, but I'm honestly not really excited about the book. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, why are you listening to it? Just DNF it. But I'm so invested in the series so far that I just want to go ahead and finish it. But I think I would enjoy this series a lot more if I read them in print. So I'm going to hang on to my print copies, and maybe at some point I will just kind of go back and just read through it in print, and maybe I'll get more out of the stories by doing that. And then another book that I started and I'm about 40% done with is on my Kindle. And my apologies to my friend Elizabeth Tyree, who wrote this book. The story is The Dragon on My Neck, and I had every intention of finishing it. It's really a cute story, but I just sometimes, some days, I cannot make myself pick up my Kindle. I don't know why. Sometimes I maybe want to read it and it's not charged, or for whatever reason, I just don't sit down with it. But I do want to get this finished. It's really a cute story. She has, I think, 3 dragon stories and another one on the way, so I definitely want to finish Dragon on My Neck this month, and maybe before the year's out I will get another story in the series read as well. And one other fantasy book that I will go ahead and mention that I started is the annotated Hobbit. Now, I've read the Hobbit before at least 2 or 3 times, and I wanted to read this annotated version, and I want to just savor it, read through it. I will probably, hopefully, get it done by the end of June, but if I don't, it's no big deal. I own this copy, and I just have it sitting by my reading chair, and when I feel like picking it up, I read a few pages, and then put it down and go on to something else. So I love The Hobbit, I love Lord of the Rings. Oh, and that reminds me. Have you guys been watching the series by Josh Gad on YouTube called Reunited Apart? If you're not familiar with Josh Gad, he was the voice of Olaf, and he was LeFou in the live-action Beauty and the Beast. Well, he has been doing a series of videos for charity where he brings back stars and producers and directors of movies from the past and reunites them on Zoom so that they're all on the same screen, but they're each in their own homes, and it's fantastic. The first one I saw was Back to the Future, which was the second one that he did. Back to the Future is probably my all-time favorite movie, and I was just over the moon watching that video. So the next video he did was Splash, starring Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks, everybody from Splash, they're all there on the video, and it was amazing. And then I went back and watched his first one, which was Goonies. Now, I wasn't a huge Goonies fan, although I did enjoy Goonies, and it was a lot of fun to see all of the cast back together for that video. But just earlier this week, he did Lord of the Rings, and I was ecstatic watching that video. I've watched it twice, and it was just so much fun to see all of the cast and the director and everybody back together for that reunion. And I think next he's going to do Ghostbusters, so that should really be super fun. If you've been watching that, let me know. I would love to chat about it. And I feel like I want to comment or send him a message and say, if you could do Star Wars, then my life would be complete, because Star Wars and Back to the Future were like my top favorite movies of all time. And I don't mean like the newer Star Wars stuff, I mean like the original, although the new stuff is great too. But anyway, I'm just so enamored with this video series, and I have really been having a ball watching it. I gotta show off my most beautiful cat. He just walked in the room, and I thought I would just introduce him to you. He's been in a couple of my Instagram posts before. This is Harry. His official full name is Prince Harry VIII, but he came to us from the neighborhood. He was a stray. We took him in, got him neutered, and then he disappeared. And I found out that the neighbors across the way had taken him in. So while we had been calling him Harry, they started calling him Prince. Well, he stayed with them for a while, and then he eventually made his way back over here, and we just kind of shared him. He would go back and forth, and pretty much now he lives here. So the reason he's Prince Harry VIII is because at the time he showed up at our house, he would have been our 8th cat. Now we have lost a couple, and he is no longer the 8th. I think he's the 6th now. But anyway, he's still Prince Harry VIII. All right, so let's move on now to the post-apocalyptic, since they are the most related to fantasy. see. It kind of makes sense to segue into those. I listened to 3 different books on audio. 2 were from the same series. I only own book 2 in the Book of Ember series, so I'll have to show you a picture of The City of Ember, which is book 1. I had read The City of Ember previously in print, and I had listened to The People of Sparks on audio. So in the month of May, I listened to both of the books on audio, so they were both rereads. And now I would like to go right on and read the rest of the series. I have the other 2 books. I'm going to need to read those in print. So that's one of my goals for June, is to get that series finished. This is a series set in a post-apocalyptic world where in the first book, people are living in a city underground, but they've been there for several hundred years, and they're starting to run out of things. So these 2 kids start figuring out how they can solve their problem and how they can help. And so then this is a sequel called The People of Sparks. In this book, this takes place in a town on the surface that has survived whatever happened in this apocalyptic type world, and they don't have a lot, but they're willing to share it with the people from Ember, and it goes from there. This book I thought was really good. It was better than I remembered. It has a lot of good themes about helping each other, getting along, human relationships. There's some political themes, and I just thought that this was a very good book, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with the rest of the series. The next book was also a reread, although I have not yet read the rest of the series. I listened to this book on audio several years ago when Katie was first reading it. This is Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer, and now I want to go ahead and continue the rest of the series. The premise of this is that the moon gets hit by an asteroid and knocks it out of orbit, and now the moon is very close to the Earth, which then starts all kinds of problems like tidal waves and volcanoes and things like that. Everything just starts going crazy. I did really enjoy the book, although I had forgotten that the author, I think, is kind of transparent about her own political views based on the time period she wrote this and based on some of the things that she says. And I felt like there was a little bit of Christian bashing. The way that the minister is portrayed in this book is not very nice. Now, that's not to say that there aren't ministers who do things they shouldn't do. That's absolutely true. But I just wish that Christians hadn't been portrayed in quite this manner. So anyway, I still enjoyed the book. I am looking forward to continuing on with the series, and this is another series that I want to finish in June. Okay, so let's move on to the historical books. Earlier in the month, I already talked about finishing the Gaither Sisters trilogy. I only own a copy of books 1 and 2, and I listened to books 2 and 3 this month. The second book is called PSB 11, and the third book is called Gone Crazy in Alabama. I've talked about this series earlier. This is such a fantastic series. It's about 3 girls who live with their father. Their mother has been estranged from them for quite a while, but in the first book they go to visit her for the first time in years. And so then in the second book now they are back home with their father and their grandmother, and it's just the story of their life being back at home and the adventures that they have and the things that they do. The series is set in the 70s, so they have an uncle who's been in Vietnam, and he comes home and is suffering from some PTSD and some other types of issues, just getting adjusted back to real life at home. Then in the third book, Gone Crazy in Alabama, their grandmother has gone back to her home in Alabama, and the girls go to visit her for the summer. So they get to experience what it's like in the South in the 70s, and it's a lot different than what they have experienced previously in their life. So it's just a really, really wonderful series. It's very heartwarming. It is very true to the times. It is a good introduction to what African American children probably went through in that time period. It was eye-opening for me, and I thought it was a beautiful trilogy, and I would highly recommend it. And I would even more highly recommend The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, by Christopher Paul Curtis. This was so good, and I listened to this on audio, narrated by LeVar Burton, who was fantastic. This is a Newbery Honor book from the 90s, and I now want to read everything by Christopher Paul Curtis. I have read Bud Not Buddy, and I loved it. It's a Newbery winner from early 2000s, and I want to read everything by him. He's such a good storyteller, and this book, especially the audio version, was so fantastic. There were times when I was laughing out loud. The story was just so funny, and the offhanded humor. The story is told from the middle child, Kenny. He's from a family of 3 children, and there's his mother and father. They live in Flint, Michigan, which is also, I believe, the home of the author. And their mom is originally from the South. So they go to Birmingham to visit Grandma, and it's the story of what happens before they leave, and then their trip there, and then while they're there. And there are some heart-wrenching things that happen. Some real-life events are woven into the story. It's just beautifully told, and I absolutely loved it. I would definitely read this again. I also listened to 3 middle grade contemporary books that I've already talked about previously in the month. I don't have physical copies of any of these, so I'll have to show you pictures. I listened to the 4th book in the Penderwick series by Jean Birdsall. It was delightful. I absolutely loved it. It's called Penderwicks in Spring. Penderwicks has a Little Women vibe to me. At the very beginning, the series starts out with 4 sisters and their little friend who is a boy, and it just feels like a modern day Little Women. The series has a classic feel, even though I believe it's set in modern day, and I absolutely love all 4 of the books that I've read so far. There's only 1 book left, and I'm super excited to read it. I hope to get it read this month, but if I don't, I will look forward to savoring it whenever I get to it. But in the 4th book, Penderwicks in Spring, quite a bit of time has passed, so the family dynamic has changed some, but it is still just as delightful as the first book, and I highly recommend the Penderwick series. I first discovered this series from AkossiwaK, who created Middle Grade May, and I am so thankful that I heard about the series from her. I think it's simply delightful. Another contemporary book that I listened to in the month of May is Honey by Sarah Weeks. This is a delightful coming-of-age story about a girl who never knew her mother. I talked about it earlier in the month, so I'm not going to go into it here, but I really enjoyed it, and it's a very short book. If you ever have a chance to pick it up, I would recommend it. And then the other contemporary book that I listened to during the month of May is Much Ado About Anne by Heather Vogel Frederick. This is book 2 in the Mother-Daughter Book Club series. I have enjoyed both of these books very much. This is about a group of girls and their mothers, and they have a book club. The series, I think, is a little bit unrealistic in that the mothers of the girls have some careers that are not your everyday careers. One of them is a retired soap opera star. Another one is a TV host. So that's fine, but you know, they're not your average group of girls. So I think that the series is a lot of fun. In the first book, they read Little Women, and in this second book, they read Anne of Green Gables. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on with the series. Almost all of them, I think, are on audio on Hoopla, which is great for me because I can get those free through my library, and I will continue to listen to the series. All right, 2 more middle grade books that I have talked about earlier in the month. I listened to Trapped by James Ponti. This is book 3 in the Framed series, which I think should still be called the Toast series. I'm going to say that every time I talk about this. But the series is based on these 2 kids who work for the FBI, basically. And they use a method of solving mysteries called Toast, Theory of All Small Things. And it's just very good. It's definitely a series that you could pick up and read for March Mystery Madness and Middle Grade March because they are fantastic middle grade mysteries. This series is really one of my absolute favorite middle grade mystery series. I first learned about it because the first book, Framed, was a Sunshine State book a few years ago, and so I have continued to read the series, and I absolutely love it and highly recommend it. The main character, Florian Bates, is a very observant young man, and he taught his best friend Margaret how to use his theory, toast. And so now both of them help out the FBI on occasion, and it's just really a fun series. And then the last middle grade book that I listened to was a nonfiction book. It's called Life in Motion by Misty Copeland. This is her story of growing up and learning about ballet and becoming a ballerina, and then her struggle to get accepted in the ballet world, being an African American. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good story. I think there are other books about Misty Copeland. This one is written by her, and I would recommend it. Okay, let's move on into the children's books. I have a children's chapter book here that is also a mystery. I discovered this series in April when we were doing Amish in April, and my favorite author of Amish books is Beverly Lewis, and I discovered that she has some various children's series, and one of the series is the Cul-de-sac Kids. This is book 6 in the series. I was able to get a hold of book 5 and 6 from my library, and I read one of them in the month of April, and I saved this one for middle grade May, even though it's not really a middle grade book. It's more of a children's book, but it is a cute series about children that live together in a cul-de-sac, and they all go to school together and they have adventures together. It's Christian based, and I think it is a delightful series for emerging readers, and I'm looking forward to reading more of these. I also reread or re-listened to the first book in the Boxcar Children series by Gertrude Chandler Warner. I think all of these are on audio on Hoopla, and I had listened to book 5 from March Mystery Madness, so I decided to go ahead and listen to book 1. And then while I was at it, I picked up the Boxcar Children Beginnings, which is by Patricia McLaughlin. This is a newer book, but it's based on the Boxcar Children characters. In this book, we get to meet their parents. This is a prequel. I happen to have this physical copy of it, but I did listen to it on audio on Hoopla, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is bittersweet because you know, if you've read the series, that the children are orphans, and this is a prequel, so we get to meet their parents. And I thought it was a very good book, very well told, and if you are a fan of the Boxcar Children and you have not read this book, I think that the author did a great job of reimagining the characters, how they would have been with their parents, and I think it's definitely worth reading. Another classic book that I listened to during the month of May was Betsy Tacy by Maud Hart Lovelace. I think this would also be considered a children's book, not a middle grade book. It was really a cute little story, and I enjoyed it. I had not heard of the series prior to hearing Kate Howe talk about it on her channel, and I think she did a read-along of the series. I did not participate in the read-along, but I was interested in the books. They have just kind of been on my radar, and I saw that this first book was on audio, so it's definitely a series that I would continue to read. I think the only one that's on audio on Hoopla is the first book, but the rest of them are on there in ebook form, so one of these days I will get around to those, or maybe I will check out the physical books from our library. But for now, I'm excited that I have at least dipped my toe in the water of the Betsy Tacy series, and I thought it was very enjoyable. It's about two little girls who are neighbors. One of them has been in her neighborhood for a while, and the other one moves in and is very shy, and so it's their story of meeting and getting acquainted and becoming friends, and it's just really a sweet little old-fashioned story. Then I have two physical books here. One of them I read on the last night of the last day of May, just to get in one more book. It had been on my TBR, and I knew that of all the books I had left that I hadn't gotten to, this one was one that I could get read in a short amount of time. I found this at a book sale a while back. I picked it up because I do enjoy Kate DiCamillo, and I had not ever heard of this series. This is book 4, I think, in the Mercy Watson series. This is a children's storybook series that can be read in any order, I think. It's about a family who have a pet pig, and in this story they decide to dress her up so she can go trick-or-treating, and it is really cute, and I'm glad that I read it. Now I will be sharing this with our Little Free Library, although I may wait and put it in the Little Free Library when it's a little closer to Halloween, since it's a Halloween themed story. And then I read this little bind up of some Trolls stories. I got this for Emily for her birthday that was earlier in May. We read the first story together, and then she got sleepy and decided to go to bed, and I finished reading the rest of them on my own. This is really a cute little book. The first story follows the first movie, and the second story is about Branch, and it may be based on one of the TV episodes, I'm not sure. And then the third story follows the second movie, which is called World Tour, which we have not seen. So I'm a little bit spoiled now for the second movie, but that's okay. If it's anything like the first movie, whenever we get it, we will watch it over and over and over, because Emily and I both have really enjoyed the Trolls movie. We also have the Trolls Holiday movie, which is also adorable, and both of us really enjoy it. We didn't get on the Trolls bandwagon when the first movie first came out, but when Emily was in the hospital last summer, the Trolls movie was one of the choices of movies that were wired into the system. Like, it wasn't on TV. The hospital had a network of movies, and they changed them out quarterly. So when she was in the hospital last summer, Trolls was one of the choices, and we watched it over and over and over. And now that Emily has the DVD, we continue to watch it over and over and over. I have watched it multiple times, and still she can be watching it in her room, and I will walk in to talk to her about something, and I'll end up sitting on the side of her bed and watching whatever song is on, because it's so adorable. Anyway, I did read this book earlier in the month. It's a bind-up of 3 different stories. Now, on Goodreads, I had to list a different book as the book I read, because this exact edition, which is called Trollrific Tales, I could not find on Goodreads. At some point, if it ever gets added to Goodreads, I'll switch my review over to the appropriate place. But for now, just as a placeholder, I just put on Goodreads that I read a Trolls children's book. Okay, so let's quickly go over the adult books that I read. There are 7 of them. Most of them I talked about earlier in the month as I finished them. One was historical. I listened to this for book club. It's called Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly. I did not find this one as compelling as Lilac Girls. This is a prequel to Lilac Girls. I only listened to this for book club, and I was really just not that interested in it. It didn't pull me in. Now, I didn't love Lilac Girls, but it was compelling enough to pull me in places, and this one I just kind of bided my time until I got through it. So I didn't love this one. I'm not saying it's bad, I just wasn't really in the mood for it. I mentioned earlier that I participated in the Light and Dark readathon. I'm not even going to tell you about the 2 dark books that I listened to. They were both short. They were both on Audible Escape. Both of them served 2 functions, because I've been doing the Audible Escape category challenge, and when the Light and Dark readathon was introduced, one of the things you could do to earn points for your team is to read books from the opposite side of the fence. So because I like to read lighter books, I was cheering and working for the light side, but by listening to dark books, I could get double points. And because I'm doing the Audible category challenge, I still had not listened to anything from the dark category or from the erotica category. So I listened to a book from each of those categories that counted towards the Light and Dark readathon, and I did not enjoy either one of them. And even though I got double points from my team, our team still lost. So I decided next year I'm not doing that again. I am going to read only light books. Even if I have to read 5 times as many, I will enjoy them, and I'll still earn points from my team, and I will not do anything that is out of my comfort zone or outside of my moral compass, and I will feel much better about that. Also, for the Light and Dark readathon, I listened to Northanger Abbey, which was for the Audible category challenge from the previous month, and I had not gotten to it. I forget, I think it counted for Gothic. So I still counted this towards light and not dark, because it basically wasn't that dark. And it was a Jane Austen that I had not ever listened to, and I didn't really understand what was happening until I finished it, and then I watched the movie, and then I kind of understood it a lot more from there. I have a hard time connecting with Jane Austen books just from reading them. I have to kind of see them played out, and then I enjoy the story a lot more. So this one was okay, but it wasn't my favorite. And then one other book that I counted for the Light and Dark Readathon, just to get in one more short book, was a little Amish audiobook. I think it was called Love in Amish Land, and it was kind of a second chance romance about these two people who had previously been Amish and had courted or dated when they were younger, and now they found each other again in later on in life. So that was sweet. It was very short, and I was just trying to cleanse my palate after listening to those two really dark books. And then the last two adult books that I read for the month, I read both of them in print, and both of them are cozy mysteries. I really enjoyed both of them, but especially the first one I read. This was for book club. It's called State of the Onion by Julie Heisey. This was fantastic. I loved it, loved it, loved it, and I definitely want to read more of the series. I own the first 6 in the series. I think there are 9 total. And because I'm such a slow reader and I was reading other things, I went ahead and loaned out my copies. This is even a library copy, but I hope that I will get them back. But so far, everyone who has been reading my copies of the books have enjoyed them. Everyone who read this first book really enjoyed it, and it's just a fun series, and I think that it's destined to be a favorite cozy mystery series of all time for me. This is really a fun book. And then the other cozy mystery that I read, I started it right after I finished State of the Onion early in the month, and it took me all month to get it done. I finally finished it on the last day of the month, and that being said, that probably says to me that I'm not going to love this series. I liked it okay. This is The Long Quiche Goodbye by Avery Ames. It's the first in the Cheese Shop mysteries. The mystery was pretty good. I thought I could see exactly where it was going, and I was completely wrong. So that alone makes it kind of a fun mystery. But there was just a lot of wine talk, which I'm not interested in, and that was kind of a big part of the cheese shop business, was also the wine business and everything. And so that kind of was a turn off for me because I'm not interested in that. But the mystery itself wasn't bad. I might still read one more just to see if it's a series that I would continue. I don't know. I have book 7 on my shelf, but I don't know if I want to read all of them up to book 7. I might just go ahead and read book 7, and then I could pass that on and call it done. I don't know. We'll see. If you've read any of this series, let me know what you thought about it. I didn't hate it, but it did take me all month to get through this book. I literally read this in 3 days, and then the rest of the month for this one. So that's about it. I think I've mentioned all 29 of the books that I finished in the month of May, and 3 of the books that I started in May and I'm still currently reading. So let me know if you have read any of these books, or if you want to read any of these books, and let's chat about them in the comments. I also want to thank AkossiwaK for hosting Middle Grade May yet again. This was my 5th year participating. I believe this is the 6th year that she has hosted it. And I want to thank Elizabeth Tyree for being my partner in hashtag Book a Day in May. I hope she did a little better than me, because I only got to 29, and I know she was doing some moving and job changing and everything. So Elizabeth, if you didn't make it, it's all right. We're in this together. But anyway, I enjoyed what I read for the most part, and I hope you guys enjoyed what you read for the month of May. Whether you read middle grade books or whatever you read, I hope you had a good reading month. So that's all I have for this video. I hope you were having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.